Like anything that's even a little bit not the vibe, I can't. Or like, what is music?
To the readers who look up
for
at the
all the
stars
underdogs who don't let fear stop them from fighting.
Dedicated to those without a
that they may
diagnosis.
experience at secondhand.
For Mom,
the
because you said I could write a book instead of getting a summer job. I love you.
For every girl who has ever felt
For every
powerless.
Nesta out there,
to 12-year-old,
and for
17-year-old,
Darren, and Annie,
21-year-old,
who are the reason I keep
and
climbing
30-year-old
my own.
me, you were never the disaster you thought
For those
you
I
were.
love,
For anyone
all
who
never
has
got
ever
to see
fallen from the
this
sky
happen.
of their life, these words are for you.
Whew.
Well, shall we?
So, hey guys.
We're here. Hi. Welcome to Her Best Interest. We're back.
Yeah, another week. What's the saying? Another day, another dollar.
Another night to make a ho holler. Right?
Hey! Maybe we shouldn't do off the cuff.
Is that other words?
I don't know. I've never heard that in my life.
Oh.
But I went to a Catholic school, so they probably sheltered us.
Not me. This is a public school education you're looking at. Should we tell them our names?
Oh, I'm Cecilia.
I'm Alexandra. Some of you know us by now, but that's who we are, in case you're tuning in for the...
We're Cecilia and Alexandra.
We're them. That's us, in case you're tuning in for the first time. That's us.
Oh my god, we're so tired.
What's wrong with us? Do you want me to start that over?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Cool.
But if you want to say I'm Alexandra again, because I cut you off like 3 times.
No, that's totally fine. I don't want to hear me talk either. It's fine. But if you are wondering who I am, I'm Alexandra. I'm one of the hosts, and I'm here with Cecilia, my co-host, as always.
Da-da-da-da. So we're trying this new thing where we don't have a script in front of us, and it's proving to be very difficult, everyone.
Well, also because I will say, Cecilia and I are both so strong and independent, and we work so hard at another job all day long. And also we have children. So those are 2 full-time jobs. And then we sit up to do this, and I don't even make words come out good sometimes, like just now. Me do best.
I start a sentence and I never find it along the way. Like the quote from The Office where it's like, oh, maybe it's from The Office where it's like, I find it as it goes. I never find it. I just start my sentences and they end up somewhere. The dumpster, the field, the trees outside. I never know where the end of my sentence is.
No, I lose a thought halfway through. I'm like, oh, I have something really good to say. And then I start and I'm like, and then the thought is not in the room with us anymore.
I start and I'm like, this is going to sound really good. And then I start listening to it, imagining that I'm not me, that I'm like listening to someone else say it. And I'm like, I actually, I don't know if this is working.
Well, it's been interesting. Actually, it's not interesting. I'm not saying that anymore. So anytime somebody on the podcast hears me say that, just veto me. Just whoop. It has been a learning experience as we've done this because I have had to learn. Whoops, the thought left.
There it goes. Yeah. You know what happens?
No, I think I've had to, what I was going to say, maybe I've had to learn how to be not like a robot. And I think it's because at work I have to kind of be a robot. And I had this whole education that was like, be a robot. This is how to recite the law like a robot. Mm-hmm. So now someone would be like, so how do you feel about that? And I'm like, I don't know. What?
Yeah. And I think it's like, it's so, I almost was like, it's so interesting.
Veto.
But we're like so on opposite ends of the spectrum in that way. So it's been such a good learning experience because I'm like, just lead with feeling and whatever I'm thinking and whatever I'm feeling in that moment is what I'll say and blah, blah, blah. And like, then try to structure that in a podcast environment. So you're like on the analytical end and like, okay, these are the facts and this is, you know, what happened. And this is how from we start here and we get here. And I'm like, just leading with whatever the wind is telling me that day. And they're both extreme because neither are like, so we're like learning to meet each other in the middle and figure out our dynamic. And
it's been fun because I think it's helpful to get me to like just chill out. I think that I really want like to just be very like put my heart out there. You know, like I want to be able to say how I feel or what I think on our podcast in a way that is coherent and makes sense, but also has feeling and still is, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to say professional, but like becoming of who I am and like a true representation of who I am. So all I say is that for those that are listening with us week by week, it's been a journey. I feel like I'm on The Bachelorette. This has been a learning experience. It's been such a journey for me, this journey.
But all that to
It's
say,
fine.
we're so grateful that you guys are listening and figuring it out with us, and we're open to feedback. Even though we are just girls.
We're just girls.
We are
Don't
just
hurt
girls.
our feelings.
We're trying to just like, I want to say breathe life into our intros, but this sounds so weird.
No, I think that's fair.
We're trying to just keep it like conversational and chatty because I like talking to you
and goofy and funny and
we're all just hanging out.
Yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
We had serious podcast business conversations today, all midlife crises, amidst talking about sending videos and pictures of Alex's new chickens back and forth. So
breaking news there. I on a whim ordered 20 chickens. I've always wanted to have my own chickens.
Let that just like sink in for everyone.
Right,
guys,
20.
Alex on a whim ordered 20 whatever's in your Amazon cart, just order it on a whim because Alex just ordered 20 chickens on a whim. No thought today.
I feel like it's an investment. It's an investment. What will that save me with eggs in today's economy with inflation?
No, for sure.
So
how many eggs do you and your family consume?
We eat a lot of eggs. I will tell you, eggs is a big thing in our house. And the answer to all the questions is it's girl math. That if I bought the chickens in the coop, it makes sense to not buy eggs. So I found out that there's like these websites where you can order chicks, they hatch, and then they overnight them to your post office. They like package them in to be safe and okay. And then the post office will call you and say, your chickens are here. But I had to schedule some vacation time for work because I do not have a broody hen for them to imprint on. So I am their mom and I need to spend like 3 days in a row at home with them. So they will imprint on. So
in a sports bra in your backyard doing skin to skin with 20 chickens at a time.
And the best part, Cecilia, is I told you we got different types of chickens. So Derek picked out, I was like, Derek, you do whatever you want. I just need 4. I just need 4 chickens specifically for me.
To imprint on me that I am their mother.
I am their mother. These are my pet chickens. The other ones like can lay eggs. Now I will not eat them. That's the one thing I told him. I said, I can't do that. I can't raise it in the backyard and then eat it. I will eat the eggs because we were hoping we don't get a rooster because then if you get a rooster, he's going to cock-a-doodle-doo and then we're going to have more chickens. So don't want a rooster. But sometimes you don't know. But Derek picked like very fiscally responsible egg laying chickens. And I picked silky chickens, which I showed you are like just fluffy. They have silk feathers. I think you should show everyone.
I think you should pull up the picture.
Of course. They look insane, which is personally perfect for me. And they have to sometimes come inside during wintertime because they can't handle the cold because they have silk feathers. So if they get wet, they can get sick.
It's so like high maintenance of them.
This is
it's giving Coachella.
It really is. It's so weird. How does my phone know everything? How does it know? Because the second we ordered the chickens on Derek's phone, we don't have any of the same passwords or any of the same stuff. And then all of a sudden my Instagram was like, do you want toys for your chicken coop? Here's a page you could follow.
Isn't that creepy?
Yeah, I don't like that. But I did order the toys.
Right, like it got me, but like who?
What was I supposed to do?
Like, thank you, FBI agent, but
yeah. So
like,
those are my
is in
updates.
charge of that? Who is looking at my activity?
It creeps me out. I don't know.
Because sometimes I'll think stuff, and then it'll show up on my like ads or my algorithm, and I never once said it out loud.
No, same. And then my TikTok, chickens.
Yeah, well now they're everywhere.
Yeah, my TikTok is also like very insane right now.
Your
My
FYP,
For You.
yeah.
Yeah.
I told you my mood is so blah this week because my FYP is all like traumatic. And then Vanderpump Rules TikTok. Like it's like trauma, Vanderpump Rules, which I've never watched that show, but I could
Me
tell
neither.
you every single thing about
Same.
all the drama. And I know whose side I'm on.
Same. I've never watched it. My TikTok right now is JoJo Siwa.
Yeah, me too,
And
actually.
Karma's a bitch. That whole thing.
Should've known
Not better. Okay, I like the original one by Britt Smith.
If I was something, I would have
Never messed around. Yeah, that one. So it's been all JoJo Siwa and the girl Britt, who originally made that song. Britt Smith, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
And then the man who attacked all the women in Australia. That one I can't watch. It makes me physically sick.
Ugh.
Makes me so sad. Vanderpump Rules, even though I don't watch it.
I've never watched it, yeah.
No, and a lot of drama with the Jonas Brothers, who apparently moved their Europe tour dates.
Yeah,
Drama.
and they like all of their fans are in an uproar because they just literally canceled their Europe tour dates because they were like, we're working on other projects. It's not the vibe right now.
Oh,
what?
Okay. That and then the way that Bluey ended.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet. I don't think I can watch it. Is it over? They're not releasing
it's over. They said that they're, from what I have seen on TikTok, which obviously is the correct and factual news all the time, it's because they want the child actors, I guess, to be able to like grow up and not have to do this. So it's like
love that,
over.
but I hate that it's at my expense.
Same. Like it is going to cost us. It's going to cost something. Not for them, but for me.
But not their childhoods, which is great for them.
Yeah, it is sad for me. So, yep.
Okay, we're going to move into our episode. Thank you guys for tuning in for this week. This week is exciting because we are, since the beginning of this podcast, we've talked about it. Kind of the tagline has been a podcast for readers and non-readers alike. Our concept that will now be taking over the second Wednesday of each month is called Open Book, and we will bring on a guest every time that will just share their story cover to cover with us. So there is no required read.
I think we're just really excited to try it out. And, Cecilia, I really think you hit the nail on the head with, the way that you wrote it in our Instagram caption, I think was so eloquent because you said part of every book is the person behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was something so like whimsical and wonderful like that. But that, and so it's really neat. So we get to kind of not only get to talk to these people and listen to what they have to say, but I have learned something new from all of the topics that we've been discussing. So I think that you guys are really going to like what we have in store from our guests today, from our first open book episode.
Yeah, so let's get into it.
Okay, so today we have a absolutely remarkable guest joining us. She is both a strong advocate for mental health as well as a survivor who's transformed her pain into a way to help others cope and to overcome. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor based out of Baltimore, Maryland. And part of the reason that she took this career path is because of her own journey that she's going to be sharing with us today to kick off our open book format.
The guest today that is joining us, she's going to be discussing the troubled teen industry and the way that this industry markets to parents and manipulates parents into sending their teens into these vulnerable programs and schools, and what that looks like from a mental health aspect, not only immediately, but also long-term. She's also going to discuss some of the proper ways for intervention if you're noticing that your child is struggling and needs help. So we're going to explore that initial experience, how it impacted her and her relationships throughout her life, and how she's used it as the driving force for the woman that she's become today. So we are so proud and so grateful to introduce our very first open book guest, Sydney Finfer. Sydney, welcome.
Hi, my name is Sydney Finfer. I'm happy to be here. I am an LCPC based out of Baltimore, Maryland, and I am also a troubled teen industry survivor, as well as a big mental health advocate.
Thank you so much again. I mean, it's like, no, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, every time.
But this is an industry that I did not know a lot about. I think, and as we were talking about right before we filmed, that's kind of the purpose of the industry, or that's kind of their goal, is to ensure that, I guess, people like me are walking around not really understanding the gravity or the depth of it. it has been an alarming couple of weeks looking into, in preparation for your episode, looking into the weight of this and what this means. And so I'm not going to take too much time introing it, but if you want to take it away and just start where you were looking to start with your open book, I am excited to listen and learn more.
I mean, I think it's a great place to start with my own experience and my own story.
Yeah.
My story begins in a home where there were two parents, right? A mom and a dad with two kids, two daughters who were struggling in their own marriage, right? My mom was struggling, my dad was struggling. They had their own mental health stuff going on as well. And I think that during that time, I started to develop a lot of behavioral issues. As a counselor now, I know that kids have different behaviors when they're experiencing trauma or neglect or any type of abnormal experience at home or adverse experience, right? And some kids internalize and other kids externalize, right? So you have some kids who will just kind of shut down. They'll listen to what their parents say. They just take commands. Then later in life, they struggle because they don't know how to make decisions on their own, those types of things. My experience was very different, where I externalized everything. And so I was extremely hostile. I was, very self-destructive. I really didn't know how to get my parents' attention to tell them this is what I needed, because I didn't have the words or the vocabulary or even the development to be able to do that. So, they were really struggling. And I think it was around middle school where I was really starting to get, in a place where I wasn't able to academically succeed. I was failing out of school. I struggled socially with friends. I was really just depressed and an anxious kid a lot. And my parents just, I don't think they understood the best way to handle that. Also, I think it's really important to say that early on in the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't as much knowledge and education as there is about these types of issues that there was then. And so I think, I like to give my parents the credit and say that they did the best with what they knew and the tools that they had, because I truly do believe that. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they made a decision to put me into an all-girls boarding school at first, which was, I was opposed to it. I did not want to. I really wanted to continue in the public school system with the friends that I had made. But I wasn't doing well, and they didn't trust me to continue to do well, which was understandable. So I started in an all-girls boarding school, and I really did not want to go there. And I just started to keep continuing to go worse. And that was the time where the headmistress of the boarding school kind of reached out to my parents and said, hey, I know of these programs that are really supposed to be helpful for troubled teens. Mm-hmm. And your daughter seems like she's really struggling. And so my parents, I guess, talked to her, and they came up with a plan for me. And the plan was to have me transported in the middle of the night to a wilderness program. These wilderness programs, if I can describe a little bit of what they're like and what they are, is they really strip children of all, they isolate you. So there's no mirrors. There's no, you can't look at yourself. There's no time or clocks. You have no idea what time it is or what time of day it is. It's supposed to disorient you. Mm-hmm. When you first get there, you're only allowed to talk to like one person. You're not allowed to speak to everybody else. You're only allowed to speak to like staff and like your buddy, whoever's helping, like the person that was assigned to help you. And there's, all of your clothes are taken. They give you everything, a pack. And this entire program, I was there for 56 days. Some girls boys are there for shorter amounts of time, and some are there for longer amounts of time. It really just depends on the severity of the issue. But from there, right, that was in Georgia, and I started in Pennsylvania at this all-girls boarding school, and I'm from Maryland, so I wasn't so far away. I gradually got farther and farther away, which I think is very interesting as well. Mm-hmm. So I started in Pennsylvania at this all-girls boarding school. In the last 2 weeks of my 9th grade experience, the headmistress approached me and let me know that, they had a point system there. And they were saying, you're really low on your points. If you go stay with the librarian tonight at what they called home away from home, which was usually for the girls that were struggling and wanted to go home, or for girls that were really in trouble. And they would stay at her house, and she would kind of make it a very cozy place for you. And she said, if you go there for tonight, I'll give you back all those points and you can go to the end of the year trip with the rest of the students. And of course I was like, that sounds like a great plan. So I packed a bag, I went over there, and that night I think there was only one other girl there, and she knew, and she was acting strangely nice to me and kind of asking me if I knew anything about these programs, if I'd ever heard of them. And I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I will never forget the experience. It was 12:09 a.m. I still visually remember exactly what like the alarm clock looked like, and there was this man and a woman at the door with the librarian in my bedroom, waking me up and saying, you're coming with us. And really me not understanding what's going on at all. It was from that moment that all of my rights were stripped away from me. I mean, couldn't go to the bathroom alone, couldn't, they held me by my belt loop to walk to the car. You are fully, if you run, they will catch you. And so I obeyed. And I got in the car. I cried the entire way. They didn't tell me where I was going or what was happening to me. I just was in this experience, not knowing who they were, what was going on. And when I got to the airport, they gave me 2 letters, one from my dad and one from my mom. And it was basically these statements of them telling me why they were sending me away.
Oh my God.
So, also in these wilderness programs, they don't give you, you're taking a shower with, a bucket of water that's hung on a tree, like a drum, and you got some soap and it's cold and you got to call your name every 5 to 7 seconds so that they can hear you, so that you're not running away or that they don't lose you. Parents, I don't think parents realize this either. Some of these programs have parents sign their rights away as for custody temporarily while their children are there.
Oh my God.
Or like there's some type of rights that the school has to make guardianship decisions or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very clear on it. But what I do know is that when I showed up to a wilderness program, and I would never wish this upon any other 14-year-old child, to have to be stripped naked and squat and cough. When I had never done drugs in my life, I didn't know what was going on, where I was. I've never had sex. I've never drank. I mean, I don't know what the purpose is, right? And now as an adult, I know they're looking for substances.
And you didn't even know.
No.
Oh
right? So not only that, now my privacy is taken away, right? In these schools, the doors are always open. So people are watching you get dressed all, like there's no privacy. And that's something too. The psychological brainwashing is a piece of it. But a lot of the wilderness programs too, when they come in, some of these girls come with dreaded hair because there's no care out there. Right? They have a brush, or some of them, are struggling with hygiene and they're not helping them. So they come with dreaded hair and locks. And, sometimes I remember one night I stayed up late, me and my roommates helping the new girl that came into our room all day the next day, just helping her with conditioner and trying to undo her dreads for her and help, and because we knew that's how girls come in. And we wanted to help them. There's camaraderie among those girls too, which I'm very thankful for. But that's, I think, the only reason we got through is having each other. I watched a girl come in with dreadlocks once and she had lice. And instead of them treating the lice, they sat her outside in front of all of us and shaved her head. And I will never, it was horrifying. Just her just sobbing, losing her hair, that's your identity. And to show up to a place where you don't know what's going to happen to you, for them to take something from you. I mean, I remember that and just being like, I cannot believe that they're cutting her hair and like making her hair so short in front of all of us like this. And then they had all of us come up and check our heads too. And I was like, are they, and I think in that moment,
you're like, are they going to
shave our heads?
Yeah,
are they going to cut our hair? Yeah. And that same girl, I feel so bad for her. There was one time where we were in the study hall late at night and they refused to let her go to the bathroom and she defecated in her pants. There was stuff like that I witnessed, and it was just, those things were just, they happened. I remember a girl that came once and she had a severe panic attack for at least 24 hours and they just put her in a room and shut the doors. And you heard her screaming and crying and yowling for hours on end. And we just had to listen to it. And that was traumatizing, listening to somebody have a full mental episode and you're just listening to them for hours. I mean, there's so many pieces of this that parents don't know that's happening there. Because they're like, oh, they're doing group therapy. The therapist checks in with me every week.
And it's sold as like nature therapy, immersive. Because I was Googling, you know, okay, what? Because I saw it from your end and this end first. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is being told to people that they're like, yeah, shipping them off, you know? And so when I was Googling, it's very holistic, and it's it's sold as this modern way of, you know, getting your child connected with like the earth and who they and you it's sold to you as like you're gonna just have this peaceful child that listens, and we can help them because we're going to bring them into nature and immerse them in this experience. And then I'm sure for some parents, I was thinking about it, when your child returns and your child is isolated and quiet and obedient and seems, you know, comes back to you as like a shell of your child, you think it worked because you're like, oh, they're so quiet and peaceful, and it's not clicking for you because you're so brainwashed as a parent as to what you've bought into that you probably think it worked because you get a shell of a child back. And when you had someone who was, as you were saying, so external with their emotions, and then suddenly you have a child that internalizes everything, you're probably thinking you have a success story
100%.
in front of you. Because I was seeing they send siblings and they do this. I'm like, how do they do it again? And then as you think about what's coming home to you, you're probably thinking that these parents feel so validated.
Yes. After that, right, I get to Georgia, the 56 days is over, and while I'm there, I'm doing therapy, group therapy. There's an educational consultant working with my parents, and the educational consultant says there's this boarding school, there's this therapeutic boarding school, and they've, you know, I'm sure they said something along the lines of, we can really help her, and they've have so much, you know, great success there. And they, you know, the thing about these schools and these wilderness programs is these wilderness programs funnel into these schools, and it's all based off of what you were saying, right? That manipulation. It's also corporate greed. So, you know, my parents were like, okay, right? Like they're going to help my kid. They're going to help her be better. She won't be depressed. She won't be anxious. She'll, you know, hopefully stop harming herself and be academically and successful, and will feel, you know, more excited and hopeful about her future. And that is really not what happened, you know? So when I went there, you know, they do a really great job of psychologically brainwashing these parents and these kids. So when these kids come and they see the parents, they have a smile on their face when they show up to the school. They're, you know, showing me around the school. They're basically putting on an act to pretend to my parents this is a great place to be, because they know if they tell the truth, they're going to get in trouble and they're going to have to stay longer. So it's all, you know, a fraudulent scheme that has been created to get these parents to get into these programs. Mind you, these wilderness programs and therapeutic boarding schools are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be there for an extended amount of time. I mean, it is such an absorbent amount. And I think that is what is really crazy to me, is that they manipulate these parents into spending $6,000 to $9,000 a month to send their kid to these places where they're being so horribly abused. And the parents are just like, oh, they're doing great. Because meanwhile, I'm sending letters going, these are my friends, right? And anything that they don't like that they see in my letters, they white it out. If I call them and I say something they don't like, they hang up the phone, right? So there's nothing that I am completely isolated. There's nothing that I can say or tell them what's going on there. The reality of what happened there, I think we can get to in a little bit. But the nutshell of my story is, after this therapeutic boarding school, after 18 months of being there, my parents were starting to catch on that something was not right, just because of how long. Every month it was like, oh, she's going to stay another month. Oh, she's going to stay. And there was all of, like, my parents were just like, something seems odd, right? So they pulled me out of this program and they put me into a co-ed boarding school for the first time in Maine. After me being in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and then Arizona at this all-girls boarding school. I've been with all girls for the past 3 years, or 2.5 at least. My parents are like, here's a co-ed boarding school. Within 4 months, I failed out. I have no social skills. I've been psychologically brainwashed. I have no idea how to be academically successful. I don't know how to provide myself structure or discipline. I have no willpower for myself. I'm completely confined to the idea or so used to discipline and structure being put in place for me, and all I did was follow it. Mm-hmm. So it made that experience so hard, right? My parents made me sign a contract when I went to that school that was like, if you mess up here, you're going to military school. So within 4 months, boom, put in military school in Missouri.
Was it the dynamic shift from female to including men then at that point? Or was it that this school was actually at the academic level that you were supposed to be at, and so then you realized how far behind you were? Like, what was the you think is like the root of that quick drop?
Freedom, there's so much happening. Mm-hmm. There's different activities, there's different classes, there's boys and girls of all ages,
and that's the decline.
That was the decline. Also, they tried to hold me back when I went there. Like, they were like, oh, we'll put her in 10th grade because she's not, she's gone through some stuff, so maybe she's developmentally a little behind in that social way. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing the academics. I didn't care. I was so focused on the social piece, specifically boys. Yeah. I think mind you, before I was sent away, I had never done drugs. I didn't drink. I'd never had sex. So like all of these kids at these schools that I went to were like, we don't understand why you're here. Yeah. It didn't seem like it was severe enough for me to be there. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted was just to be loved. Something I noticed is I was so like sex focused. Yeah. Not like having sex, but just having sexual intimacy with somebody because I just wanted to feel loved and cared for.
And that validation.
Yes.
You had been so like isolated and robbed from just basic human connection.
Yes. Even a human touch.
Yeah.
Wasn't allowed to like hug people really. Like, I mean, there were so many things that I wasn't allowed. And that I really was just so like there's so much freedom, like to go from a place where you have nothing. I mean, not even your own clothes, to then being in a place where you can have everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't, how do you expect a child to be able to understand how to navigate that when they didn't learn any of those skills? I mean, I think that's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And, after that, I graduated from military high school and again, put back into the normal world, right? I graduated from college. I failed out of college twice because all I was focused on was boys. I just wanted, and then I honestly think that for a year, it was just all I was focused on was sex. Yeah. And I wanted instant gratification and at least temporary something to just show me that somebody wanted me. I was wanted. And I think, that became a really horrible way for me to cope too, because I was depending on men to give me the validation that I was supposed to be giving to myself, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, I think it took me a while to understand, and I think that's something too, is I don't think I really understood that a lot of these people who went to these programs struggled the same way that I did afterwards.
You're not taught to communicate with each other, let alone about how you're feeling. There's so many layers to the isolation.
It's strange because they want you to speak, but the way that those schools work, right, the therapeutic boarding schools, is it's all based on tattletaling, essentially, right? That's how you get through the program. There's phases, right? You have to do these seminars and these phases, and if you don't get through, they drop you. And that's what kept happening to me. Is I wasn't, one time I got dropped for walking out of the enter door instead of the exit door in the cafeteria. Makes me stay, who knows how much longer that is and how much extra money that is for my parents just because I walked out of the wrong door. Right? So we were allowed to speak to each other, but the whole way that we were told to speak to each other, right, is we had feedback groups probably at least once a week. And this is essentially what attack therapy is, right? So we were basically told, hi, this is what I did this week, this is what's going on. And then someone goes, can I give you feedback? And they come up to you and it's just like, boom, boom, criticize, jab, jab, jab. And all you're taught to do is put people down. So like these, and that's the way you graduate the program, is you tell on people. You tell people, you basically are the teacher's pet. you make sure that everybody else around you is below you so that you can rise to the top. I mean, I think you saw me in college, which is a really great example of this, actually, when we were joining the sorority. And there was a lot of, it wasn't even like bad hazing at all.
I was going to say, we probably look so stupid to you.
Yes. And which is why I would like laugh in everyone's faces and why I was like, shut the fuck up all the time.
Yeah, you're like, this is dumb. Like, this
yes.
is, you guys wouldn't last a day in what I've been through. And here you are trying to tell me what your favorite color is. Bitch, I don't care.
Yes, literally. Thank you. So I think that's why it was so hard for me too in the sorority, because I was never someone to just like, okay, I'm going to go with the crowd. Like, I've always been like, this is my thoughts. And I'm going to, and like, because of my experience, I've been like, this is what I stand on. And I did that in the sorority too, where I was like, I don't agree with this, because I've always been that way. But I also just like saw the girls like crying and I was like, you know, like it would just be like mind boggling. Like, I understood it was upsetting, but I was like, we're fine. You know, like we're fine, bro.
You're like, we have our own clothes. We're allowed to walk in and out of the doors without getting points taken away. Like, you're not going to fail out because you went in the inner door. Get back in line and shut up.
Right. You can eat what you want to eat. Like, I don't understand. So the way that my program worked, and something I really struggled with there, and the reason I think I was pulled, which is something I'm actually very grateful for now, is that I was so morally, I just think I always had an overly developed sense of justice. And I really disagreed morally with what was going on there. Mm-hmm. And I could not submit myself. I really, like, there were girls around me that just put their heads down, did what they were asked to do, and, you know, hid under the radar and got their way through. And I was like, fuck this. Mm-hmm. There was no way I was going to just put my head down and let people do what they wanted to me. And I couldn't. I think something that's been my biggest weakness and my biggest strength is my honesty. Mm-hmm. And in that program, your honesty is what hurt you. Which I think is, again, part of the psychological brainwashing that they do in these programs, which is they tell you, be accountable, don't play the victim. But when you are honest and you tell the truth, you get in trouble. So it's very confusing. You don't understand. And I think a lot of these programs, what they're you know, and I know you watched part of the program, mm-hmm. Cons, Cults, and Kidnapping, which is on Netflix, and I would encourage everybody to watch that documentary. It is extremely informative and has a lot of really, really great conversations and perspectives. The root of this program really starts with a cult.
Yes.
And the seminars and all these things that are happening in these programs are fraudulent. The school that I went to is actually being charged for fraud. And so all of this psychology that they're teaching is not really, you know, some of it is real psychology because they have actual therapists there, but some of it is all just mumbo jumbo.
Well, and so the therapist's role there is to just further this obedient agenda, right? Uh-huh. You're not getting like a true therapist in the room to explore your, right? Or is it?
You know, I think that's the strange part about it. And I think that's something I'm still trying to dissect.
Yeah.
Because I loved my therapist there for so long. And I also think that's part of my own trauma is for years after that, I only saw male therapists. And I always felt like I needed tough love. And that's what those programs teach.
Yeah, that was like the phrase. And one of the podcasts I was listening to said that's not even a loose phrase. That's like a formal phrase in the industry that they're selling these parents on, and that they're telling you that, like, you know, your tough teen needs tough love. Like, it's a professional term to them.
Yes. There's a lot of other cult terms and things that I used for a really long time, not unknowing that they were cult language. Like, there are no accidents. Don't play the victim, right?
They're all cult.
These are like the signs that are painted around the seminars. Wow. That are like hanging up, you know? And so they're like kind of fed to you, mm-hmm. you know, these ideas and these thoughts and these words, these languages, you know? So yeah, I think the whole thing is the therapy there, you know, which I think is actually very strange. Part of the therapy there actually really helped my family. Mm-hmm. And because we did do family therapy and we did talk about things that were really hard to talk about. And it was the first time I saw my parents hug each other in 9 years. And I do think that, and I think that's the part that I struggle with, is that there were pieces of that experience that I do think helped my family. But do I think that I could have experienced that in other places that were safer? 100%, absolutely. And I think that's where it goes, which is that just because I had some benefit from it doesn't mean these are the programs that you should send your children or your families or whatever to. Mm-hmm. They are extremely dangerous. They cause lifelong trauma. And something that happens to a lot of these teens that leave is later on in their life, they commit suicide or they get addicted to drugs and they overdose because the PTSD, there's complex PTSD from being in a place and not knowing when you're going to leave for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, and just the initial moving you without telling you where you're going, what you're doing. You get a letter from your parents telling you this is what you've done, this is why you're here. That initial experience alone would cause lifelong trauma in ways. So then it only gets worse from there. Like once you enter and start in these programs, you're only like, it's hard to even conceptualize or unpack how so many adults and so many teachers and licensed therapists and can set up this system that is so incredibly traumatizing, and it's like very clear how that would bring you lifelong trauma. So to you, and kind of one of the initial things in your story, you just said that you were one of the students that was unwilling to break or to be kind of mentally broken. So one of the things that I was seeing when I was looking this up was that in some of these programs, and I don't know about yours, made you put kind of a target on your back to staff, because it was like, okay, who can break the kid? I just wanted to know about the validity of that, or the what that target on your back looked like in your program, because they are all different. If you'd be willing to speak on it.
I mentioned that earlier when I said I would get dropped all the time. So the way that my program worked was that there were 4 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Each phase comes with different privileges, right? So when you get there, you're initially on phase 1. You wear red polo, you get a skirt and like slacks, and you're not allowed to wear makeup. You can't use like a hair straightener. You can't you can only use clear nail polish. You can't pluck your eyebrows. There's only a few things, I barely remember it, but there's only a few things that you're allowed to do. And as the phases go up, you get more privileges, right? Phase 2, you can see your family, and I think you can go visit them in Arizona, but you can't go home. Phase 3, you're allowed to go home, but you have to come back. And phase 4 is like the end, and you graduate. I never made it to phase 4. I had friends that came after me and left before me. And I think that is a testament to the program itself. Something that was talked about in the documentary, the program, which is that the younger students seem to get targeted more because the older students can sign themselves out when they're 18. So there's not as much, they know that the younger ones, they can push to stay longer. And when I got there, I turned 15 there. So it did put a huge target on my back. And because I was so defiant to the rules, it put a bigger target on my back. And I was dropped constantly. And I was made to do a lot of extra work hours. And that's something I think that's really important for the parents to know too. And I want to get into this, the types of abuse that occur at these programs. I did a lot of child manual labor, a lot. Like cleaning the men's toilets and pulling weeds and breaking down boxes and, anything you could possibly think of, they're using the students to save money to get these things done, right? So there was so much manual labor that I did because I was constantly dropped. Privileges were constantly being ripped away from me. I would think I had something and then it was gone. And then I also knew that every time that they would drop me, I was going to be there for longer. And that, every time that happens, I think that's traumatic in itself. Just not knowing how much longer I'm going to be here, and even not knowing how long I'm going to be there in general, but knowing it's going to add more time. So yes, I do think that is absolutely true. In my experience, I didn't experience specific staff members trying to like break me, quote unquote, but I definitely was dropped a lot. And that was a very common experience for me. And I actually spoke to one of the girls I went to the school with recently. We spoke for 3 hours on the phone. And that was something she said to me. I remember that you would get in trouble a lot. and that you were made to do a lot of work hours and LOA. And this LOA, I don't even remember what it stands for, but every Friday they would have like a movie night and the girls would get popcorn. And I think I probably went to like 2 or 3 ever. I rarely remember going to them because I was always in study hall, because I was always in trouble for something. I don't even remember what.
Yeah, and the piece that I don't want to get lost is you're describing yourself prior to this program as someone who did not need this prison level of intervention. And that was another thing in the documentary and a few podcasts, that they were like, so many students just get wrapped up in these that really should not need this level of intervention and do not, because the one girl in the program, the documentary, she brought a Mike's Hard Lemonade to school, a singular Mike's Hard Lemonade to school, and was sent off to this program and was physically abused and just was there for, I think, 18 months. I don't remember how long Catherine was there.
Yeah, she said she was, I think it was 15.
Okay, 15.
And her dad pulled her as well.
And as a parent, you're looking at your child and you're deciding what is obedient and what is disobedient. And you're funneling your child into a place where the initial action or actions that your child is taking, the consequence doesn't match it.
No, it does not.
And it doesn't make sense, which is exactly true when you echo that you don't even know why you were in trouble. You just remember the punishment, but you don't remember what you did.
It's completely disorienting. And, you know, I think that's something I've, you know, when I talk to my parents afterwards too, you know, I'm really glad that my parents are able to kind of unpack some of this with me and for me to help me understand why that they made this decision. Right. And I think a lot of it was fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it comes down to, is these parents are so vulnerable because they are so fearful for their children. And when you are in constant fear and fight or flight, you are vulnerable to anything. And if you think your child is going to kill themselves and you don't know what they're going, and I think that's where my parents were, which was like, and also that's something the program feeds too, which is like, your child, if we don't help them, they will die. They will kill themselves. Like they will die. And so my parents, I think, believed that already. And then this was like fed. So it just fed the intrusive, anxious thoughts that were already there, right? Of like, we can save her. And I didn't really need to be saved. I just needed to be heard. And I think that's the biggest difference. You know, something that I really wanted to talk about too is like the abuse that happens in these programs. And you know, there's the psychological brainwashing piece from all of these seminars and this cult-like atmosphere. But there's also, you know, like I talked to you about the punishments when if you were punished, you know, sometimes the girls would get on SNS, which I think stood for silence and something else, where you weren't allowed to look at them or speak to them. So if that never happened to me, but I watched it happen to other girls. You know, I think also some of my own trauma is secondary because I watched a lot of girls go through really traumatic experiences. One of my friends was talking about what you were talking about and how she feels. When we were talking on the phone for 3 hours, she'd said to me, you know, what do you remember about me? You know, like we were filling in gaps for each other because we don't remember out all of our experience. That's some of it probably due to PTSD, not remembering, and some of it maybe just time. But something when I told her how I remembered her, I said, you were very timid, very quiet. You didn't talk a lot. And she said, that's so interesting because that's not who I was before. And it's something that she told me that she's had to navigate as an adult because it served her very poorly, that she didn't speak up. She never advocated for herself. She didn't know how to lead at all. And so she's been having to unpack and unlearn all of the put your head down, don't play the victim, you know, be accountable, shut the fuck up, bring other people down with, you know, and get yourself ahead. Like all of that stuff she had to unlearn, and she had no idea that it came from that. And within months of coming home, she told me she was diagnosed with PTSD.
Oh my God. And that was another thing that you had mentioned when we were on the phone this week. I think it's a universal experience with trauma in general, that you mourn or grieve the identity of like, what if this hadn't happened to me? Who would I be? And it sounds like such a reflection of that idea because, I mean, she was curious. Who did you remember me as? And then when you echo it back to her, she's like, yeah, that's not, before I started this, that's not who I was. And again, I think with like trauma in general, whether it's one significant event or one traumatic event or multiple traumatic experiences, that's a piece of grieving that is difficult to confront, because how do you not sit in that? How do you understand that and accept who you are now? I don't know if that's something that you feel that you can share, but
I mean, I think that's been, after this documentary came out, I think that's been the one piece that I've struggled with the most, which is if I would have stayed home, gone to the public school I wanted to, continued to make the friends I wanted to make friends with, and just enjoyed my life, who would I have been? And I think that there is grief in that, and that's something I had to talk to my parents about too, and have broke down about, is just, there's an entirely different life that I could have lived. And it's not that I don't like who I am, or that I'm not grateful for where I am and what I'm doing, and I'm happy with the person that I am, but it is very strange and I don't even know how, it's a very detached feeling to think that you could have been somebody else. They're also doing the trainings too, these seminars. There's parent trainings, and so there's a teen training and there's a parent training that are the same, but they're not really the same. It's much gentler for the parents. And then there's a family seminars that they do. All these seminars are really, really screwed up. There's an activity, I didn't even get to the second seminar just for the teenagers. I only made it to the first one, and I got kicked out the first time. And it was for something silly. If they deem that you are not ready, or that in some way they ask you to leave, and that you have to, again, makes you stay longer. Right? So there are different names for it. I think the first one was challenge, the second one's action, and then they're all different. Then there was like parent 1, parent 2, parent challenge. My parents did parent challenge. They loved it so much that my grandparents and my aunt also came to do parent challenge. That's how the brainwashing works.
Yeah.
Right? You spread, this is so great, right? And this, if you look up LifeSpring, which is where a lot of this started, the owner of my school was married to the man who created these seminars, which is mind-boggling. And she has, looking back on it, I'm going to name her because I think that she needs to know the impact she's had on these people. Her name is Jeannie Courtney. And I realized, looking back, how traumatized she was as a person, and how she really thought that she was helping these kids and these families. I really truly think she thought that. But at the same time, I also believe that she also knew that she was harming. And I really pity her. And I hope she knows that. I hope that she knows that all of these women that went to her school, she either did so much damage to them that they died, or that she did so much damage that they decided to succeed and put it in her face and show her how fucking great we are, how amazing, how strong, how intelligent, everything that she said we were not. Because that's exactly what her intention was, to break us down. These schools, we were talking about breaking down the kid, and if I had a target on my back. I think something that's really powerful here is the cult and these schools. Their entire goal is to strip you and break you down of your identity and create you a new identity with the one that they put in. And that was her intention. And I really hope that, I have no idea if she'll ever hear this, but I really hope that she does, because I really hope that she knows that the things that she's experiencing now are, and all of the karma and all of these students coming back and bringing her to court, it is deserved. And she should be able to step up and speak her story too, because her story, I'm sure, is very powerful. And I think it would be even more powerful to see somebody like that speak out for what we're speaking out for, because she has an experience too. I believe she went through some of the LifeSpring trainings. I believe that she was part of a cult. And I think, Jeannie Courtney, I'm yelling at you, man. Get up and start showing these girls that you meant to help them and that you didn't mean to harm them, because that's what we want. And I think a lot of these girls want to know that your intention was good. At least I do. And maybe that's just me. but I do. So yeah, there's a lot of abuse that goes on there, and there's so many people in this pyramid kind of schemey situation. And it's like you said, a lot of these kids come back and they're a shell of themselves. I wasn't, and I don't think I ever will be. I think that I think there's been times in my life where trauma has caused me to feel that way, but I don't allow it. I could never allow myself to submit to the ideas of other people, because mine, I think mine are just, my morals are just too strong.
Did they ever have your sibling participate in any of these things when they were coming to visit you in this program in these schools?
So my sister and my two stepsisters, actually my two stepsisters didn't come to the family training, but my sister did. And she did do a lot of family therapy with us. I don't know how those things have impacted her, if I'm being honest. And we haven't talked about it. So I am unsure as to how that has impacted her. But I do know that she wasn't, something that is, I think, the saddest piece to me about that entire experience is the relationship that shifted between my sister and I. And I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because I think that's a big piece for me. Is I didn't see my sister for 9 months, and to live with your sibling and do everything and be 2.5 years apart and see each other every day, to not seeing them and barely speaking to them and not knowing what they're doing, and then seeing them. And also it was during a time where we're both developing. So I remember seeing her after 9 months and she didn't look the same. And I probably didn't look the same. And I remember hugging her and her being kind of stiff and uncomfortable, and it was disconnected. Mm-hmm. And I think our relationship has had a lot of ebbs and flows over the last several years, because there's trauma that I had imposed on her from my own trauma. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was unknowingly, the anxiety that I've had afterwards, after all of this, the panic attacks and all these things, they've impacted my sister and her experience being around me. And that's impacted our relationship, which I think is a really, these programs have the ability to ruin families and to tear relationships up or put, blocks within them. And I think that is a really upsetting experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's also, nearly a direct juxtaposition between you being sent away and did she stay home that entire time she was home?
Yeah. So I wish my sister was here to talk about her experience too.
Right.
But what I do know is that what my sister has relayed to me is that she does not, I think for a very long time, I felt like my sister had the good life. I felt like I got, dealt a really shitty hand, and she was like kind of favorited. Before all this happened, before I was sent away, I was already having outbursts and things. And so I was already being isolated at home. Like there were Disney World trips that they went on and would leave me with my grandma because I was too much trouble to kind of take to places, and things like that. And I think the way that my sister has expressed it to me is, for a very long time, I just thought that she had it easy, or that she had a better life. And in retrospect now, as an adult, I think what we both talked about is she was parentified. She really took care of my dad when I wasn't there. My parents had, I'm sure, dealt with their own grief in sending me away. And my parents, my dad has his own mental health struggles, and my sister kind of took the position of being a parent, mm-hmm. which I think is still sometimes a theme in our relationship a little bit. I think maybe she would disagree, but, that's something we've talked about is she does not feel that she's had it easy at all. And I agree with that. I think that she had to pick up a lot of the pieces. Mm-hmm. And I think that experience is very valid for her. And I think for a very long time, I felt a lot of shame and guilt for not being there. And I realize now that was out of my control. So all I can do is just kind of be a good big sister now and be here to listen and understand and try to, help the best ways that I can if she needs it or if she wants that.
Mm-hmm. The manipulation that goes into this is so, it's sick, because the whole thing I can think about when you're talking is how you lost your sense of safety. That, you want children to feel safe and that they will be okay. And you have that taken from you in the worst way possible, in a time where you're disoriented, you're with people you don't really know. And then there's no stability. And because you don't know, am I going to be here? Am I going to be going somewhere else? Do I get to go home this month? Do I have to stay here? And not only are these two things kind of uplifted and taken from you, but then the way they manipulate your family and get your family involved to then come and see you, where I can't help but think it must have felt like everything in the world is against you when you have these people that are using this point system to give and take privileges and your basic human rights.
Yes.
And then they have your family come visit, and you feel like they're against you because you don't know what they're being told. I mean, while it absolutely and most directly affects you, hearing you talk about it, you can see kind of the trickle effect as it affects the members of your family as well.
Absolutely. I also think for a very long time, and I don't know if it was this program, but it's something that I talked in therapy years afterwards, was I think my parents, and I could be very wrong, they might disagree with me on this, but I think my family saw me as fragile for a very long time after. It was like, ooh, Sydney needs a little special help. Sydney's a little, it's like Sydney's not really getting things. And there was a reason for that. And, I think I remember talking in therapy and being like, I don't think my parents, my family sees me the way that I am now. And I think a lot of that, and I could be wrong, but I do think part of that is due to me being in that state for so long and them constantly seeing me in a place where they were told that I was like a bad kid. And so it's like, well, what's going to happen when she's an adult? Is she going to be okay? And it was constantly like, I felt like, my family was kind of, it impacted our relationships because I was constantly, I was being treated like a child when I was an adult. So yeah, it definitely trickles down and it impacts all pieces of not just me, but my family. Alex, something that you said that I wanted to discuss and something that the documentary really shed a light on was they used a word that I had never used before to describe the experience of being there. And once I heard her say it, it was really validating, and it is exactly how I felt. It is imprisonment. And that is exactly how I felt. I felt like I was imprisoned and I could not leave. If you left, they would find you, they would bring you back, you would get dropped to you would get to be on phase orange, which is even below phase 1, so it was like, I can't run away. I can't call for help. I have nothing safe, and nothing's stable, like you said. And it's constant. You're in constant fight or flight. And there were so many periods during that time there and through my boarding school experience where I just had like these huge, I remember like one time in military school, like I didn't run away, but I like ran to like, the school was actually like almost in a neighborhood. And I ran to like someone's front lawn. And blood curdling screams, screaming on my knees, just sobbing. And I remember so many times just, even before I got sent away, just like asking God, like, why me? The only word that I can use to describe what it felt like is just, I constantly felt helpless. And there was anything anyone could do to help me. And I was I had to suffer, So it was, I think those experiences have also caused me, lifelong trauma and my own, ways of navigating life. I'm definitely, how it's impacted me as an adult is I have night terrors very often, and they're usually around a school setting, or traveling to some place, or sometimes my parents are there and they can't get to me, or like something's medically wrong and they can't get to me. Medical neglect happened at that school a lot too. So a lot of the dreams are like centered around like just school stuff. Like I'm in my 30s. Like that's crazy to me. Like 15 years later, I'm still like having night terrors like I was there. I have, 2 years ago, I developed really severe OCD. And it had always been there, but that was the first time that it actually like fully showed itself. And I've been trying to process that a lot too, and trying to dig to the roots of that. And when I have dug into the roots of it with different therapists and doing ERP and EMDR, which are different types of therapies for trauma and OCD, it all roots back to trauma. It all roots back to that feeling of helplessness. And OCD is about gaining control. So, I think that's something that's important to talk about. You send your children here, and you think they're going to feel safe, and the reality is they are helpless.
And that's not a feeling that comes back. I mean, it takes so much work to feel safe and secure, and to have that stripped at such a pivotal age. It's not something that comes back overnight. It's not something that comes back in a year. It's not something that comes back in several years. And thinking too about what you said earlier about how the people that come out of these programs or out of these schools and commit suicide, or they become addicted and they overdose. Not only that, but there's no structure or setup to kind of get help or resources to be available. I just had a train of thought and I lost it, but I was thinking about, these things are taken from these children, taken from you, and they don't just come back. And it's no wonder that the suicide rate and whatever that may be is probably what it is. Because we don't have avenues for any of this to get better. And the whole time you've been talking, I've been thinking about the legal aspect. I mean, it's all based on fraud and manipulation, because I just don't understand how it can be legal. And I guess what you say is that the hiccups they put in these contracts about signing over the parental rights, therefore gives these people in these organizations the ability to do these things to you, which is awful.
Resilience is literally tattooed on my spine, because I just think that it is my backbone. Mm-hmm. It is what I rely on, is to just get back up. And I think that's something I sometimes I don't think I trust myself to do that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to fall and I'm just going to get stuck there. But every fucking time, somehow, some way, I get up. I'm even impressed with myself for that. So, it's just inherent. I ended up actually going back to that military school to get my associate's degree for college.
Wow.
And I had a conversation recently where my dad was like, well, I thought you wanted to do that. And I said, it was the only place I was ever successful. I didn't understand how to do it without that. And that was the only place I had ever experienced it. So I went back there, and I think that says a lot too, which is like, I literally could not navigate adulthood without going back to my high school, because they also had a junior college. That school has also since been shut down for legal reasons. There was a lot of abuse and hazing that happened at that school as well, which, I'm not even going to get into, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the troubled teen industry today. And these wilderness programs and these therapeutic boarding schools are really the main pieces that parents really need to be aware of.
And they're kind of, what's the word? I think sensationalized, namely because I can tell you the one place I hear about this program all the time, and like Dr. Phil. He's like pitching it all the time. Get this troubled teen on here. They've got to go to the ranch. You've got to go to the ranch, and you see it in the media. And especially how, Dr. Phil's been on TV forever, and people really react to that, especially seeing it in there and in that aspect, and I'm sure that any of the people that have been on his show who were forced to go to a ranch like that, and to be clear, the programs themselves, do they also have schools or some sort of academic setting as well connected with them?
The wilderness programs do not. And the wilderness programs are temporary. They're kind of like a holding until they find a place for you, or they either send you home or they send you to another place. So the wilderness programs do not, but these schools say they do. If you watch the program at Ivy Ridge, which was in Staten Island, I believe, in New York, they had no education program. And a lot of these schools are not actually certified with the Board of Education in their state. So some of these kids actually end up graduating with diplomas that are not real. And then they end up having to get GEDs because there is no actual education being taught. Something I found out after is that there were therapists at my school that weren't licensed. I would not have been surprised if there were teachers that had no qualifications to be teachers.
That was my next question, was the validity of the schooling and the education and the people who were teaching, if they're actually teaching?
I don't know. You know, I remember one time where I just refused to go to class because I was so panicked all the time and anxious, and I just was forced to do manual labor. So, like, I don't even remember, you know, if the education was actually good there. But I'll tell you this: I don't remember learning shit except for like Shakespeare or like, you know, like that's like probably the only thing I remember actually learning there, and math. Oh, and I do remember I had a science class. Just came to me. But yeah, so there were some classes that I did take that I enjoyed. I will say that. And I did have some teachers that I really appreciated. I had one teacher. He was amazing, and he was a burn victim actually. And he, you know, I think he was the only teacher there that made me feel kind of safe. I think he just empathized with us, and that was probably like the only person. But you know, sometimes with even my therapist, I didn't. I remember one time I was having a panic attack, and I just went in there, and I mean, hyperventilating probably, and I was just so panicked and freaked, and he was just like, you know, it wasn't helpful. He said something like, "Get back out there." Like that was my therapist. It was like tough love kind of thing. But like this teacher sometimes I think was more gentle and but yeah, some of these teachers were great and some of them were really not. And I do know that some of the children, the girls that went to my school were sexually abused by one of the teachers as well as one of the male staff that was there at one point. So these places, you know, also, you know, again, have that cover of safety, but they're hiring people where they don't do background checks. They have no knowledge. You know, two of the people that were staff members at my school were previous students, which I think says so much about how powerful that psychological brainwashing really is. They also were very homophobic. So like and a lot of this cult stuff and like the schools are also based in Mormonism. So, you know, there's like a very underlying, like, we don't like homosexuality here.
And the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah.
Both. It's Mormonism and the Catholic Church. It just depends on the school. And
yeah,
the program.
I guess. So, like, when you're in a place like that, for me, I think I was very, like, morally, like I said, I think I've always had a very overdeveloped sense of justice. So, for me, it came out afterwards in seeking relationships, you know, sexual relationships with people, just to be able to feel wanted and you know, good enough and loved and cared and validated.
What are the proper ways to intervene at that level? Or what do you think is, you know, when you're noticing these things in your teen or you're noticing these things in your child or your friendships, your adult relationships, whatever, what do you feel are ethical and helpful ways to intervene?
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because there's a reason that I went into the field that I went into, and it was because of all of the experiences that I saw in other people. It wasn't it was partially my own, but it was really watching these girls around me and their families and seeing all of these experiences and knowing that I could be somebody to help. You know, if you are a parent who has a teenager who is struggling, externalization is going to look like, you know, maybe making poor decisions, risky decisions, being impulsive, self-harm. It could be, you know, sexual behavior. I mean, I think that could be so many things, but I think what's really important is to note the introspective behaviors, those internalized behaviors, because they're really easy to ignore. If a child is, you know, I think also sometimes this is really hard for parents to see too, because sometimes parents think their child is doing really well.
Yeah.
And the child, right? And that's the thing is, if you notice anything in your child that just doesn't seem, if you're like normal, right? Or typical to who they usually are, talk to them. And I think that's a big piece. Talk to your kids. Ask them what's going on. What's going on at school? Are you happy there? Do you like your friends? Are you happy with what's happening at home? Do you like the structure that we've created? Like, ask your kid what it is that they want, and actually listen instead of being like, we're not doing that. Because that doesn't allow the child to feel like they have any independence or freedom or understanding. It's everything is being guided for them, you know? So I think the internalization is hard because sometimes internalization can just look like a kid who's very quiet, who follows all the rules, who does really great in school, and the parents, why would I send them away? They're great, you know? So those things are really hard to see.
Yeah.
And I would just say, if you notice anything, it just regularly check in with your kids. Ask them how they're feeling. And if there's something going on with your teenager, don't just send your teenager to a therapist. It's time to go to family therapy. That is a big thing. And I think that's something I learned too, is that a lot of the time, especially now as a clinician, I get parents, I worked with kids for years, and I recently made the switch to adults only because I didn't want to do it anymore. Because what happens is these parents send their kids in and they go, my kid's struggling, help them. And I talk to the child, and after a couple sessions, I usually realize it's the parent. The parent's doing something. They're not disciplining the way that they should be, or they could be, right? They're they're not allowing their children to have any independence, or there's too much structure or something. And the parent comes in, and then I give them parenting, and they don't make any changes. Right? So then the child goes home and continues to do the same thing, and they're like, my kid's fucked up. It's like, no, there's things that you're doing as a parent.
You're fucked up.
Like, the reality is, patterns in your children are most likely, I would say 85% of the time, are generational.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know,
I'm sending that to my dad.
Yeah. And if you notice something, like, in being this experience and now also being a clinician, I've seen that so many time and time again. Yeah. Which is, people come in, I have clients in their 60s, and they're talking to me about their life, and then they're like, I'm like, well, let's talk about your childhood. And then we go back, and it's like, well, that's why you do that.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes parents don't realize that we teach our children things, and sometimes I always say this with clients, not everything is taught, it's learned. You don't teach your children how to be disrespectful. They learn that from you, right? You don't teach children how to fight. They learn that from you. So anything that you're modeling for your children, take a look at yourself as a parent. See what you're doing that you could be shifting, and think about your own childhood. What did your parents do that wasn't helpful, that you would have wanted to do differently? And what things did they do that was helpful that you want to continue on? And what things are you doing that you've come up with yourself that you think maybe really aren't benefiting my kid? Right? Take a look at yourself and be willing to know that not any parent, there's no parent that's perfect. And there's no parent that has a child without trauma, because generational trauma is just inherent. Mm-hmm. So it's about taking a moment to look at yourself and say, how have I contributed to this? And what can I do differently moving forward to help my child succeed?
Wow, that's so powerful. I think everybody would benefit for that. I think people with children, people without children, being able to reflect in that manner and ask yourself that.
Yeah, because it shows up in your adult relationships too. You're right. Like,
absolutely,
how you navigate relationships, how you know to fight, how you know to show or receive respect, or get, all of those things are from childhood, because you watched and you observed, or, when I do this, this happens, or my trusted adult treats me this way when I do this, so I'm going to do it this way. Like, children, lying is a big one that parents are constantly punishing for lying. And why is your kid lying? Like, I was a big liar growing up. I was a huge liar. And it's because I was taught that if I just told the person in front of me what they wanted to hear, my trusted adult, what they wanted to hear, I would get that validation, that pat on the head, that good girl. So that is like, then you lie. You lie everywhere because it works. And
you people please.
Yes. And you people please, and you lie because you just want that validation from the person in front of you. So I think that was a really just well put way of saying that. I guess that's what comes from years of being
yeah.
Yeah, I've also,
I guess that's your degree.
I've also spent decades in therapy myself, so.
Yeah. So how did you feel? We can jump into your parents.
Yeah.
How did you feel about your parents, as it was happening from when you first got that letter, and then how is your relationship today? Because you did mention that your dad kind of noticed and pulled you out. So did that have any impact on how you felt? Did you talk to him for a long time? What was that?
Yeah. I actually think it was my mom that was the one that had the thought to pull me. It wasn't my dad. I will say that before the program, my parents and I were not on good terms. I was really, really self-destructive, and I was just destructive in general. Like I wouldn't do my homework. I remember times I would just run to my room because I was so afraid of my dad because I didn't do my homework, and he would just bang and scream on my door, like, let me in. And, I would get grounded all the time. Like I wasn't doing well. So I think, initially I was already not in a good place with them. I think through the program, I don't think I felt anger until like the military school. I think I was just like, they're trying to help me, but like I was angry, but I was also like trying to understand, I think. And then it was like military school. I remember when I went, and I remember specifically, so coach, and he is the high school principal at my military school. He is like one of the, I think he's one of the main reasons that I've succeeded, and I give a lot of credit to him. I'm really thankful and grateful for him. He let me live in his guest house when I went to college there, and he came to pick me up in Florida. I think I was with my mom at the time, and he does this for a lot of students, where he'll go to their house, talk to their parents, and then bring the kid back with him. And so when he came, my parents were like, I remember freaking out. I didn't want to go. I was livid. And then it was like, I knew I had to go. I didn't really have a choice. And then it was like, both my parents were like, well, do you want me to come with you? And I remember just being so angry that I was like, no. I think that was the first time I really was like, I don't even know how to describe it, but I was just so angry with them that I didn't even want them to be involved in my life. Yeah.
Like you would
like, I was like, I'm gonna suffer alone. And I'm not even gonna allow you to be a part of my suffering. I think, so it has impacted our relationships. I think I talked a little bit about how I felt like my parents kind of viewed me as a past self for quite a while. As I've gotten older, I think my parents, have seen me succeed, and because of that, they are, our relationship is different. I know that their intentions were always to help me, and it was never to harm me. And I think that's always something I have to keep in mind, because otherwise you would be angry, right? And I don't have a really, like, I could be angry, but it's not going to benefit me. And I love my parents, and they love me, and I think they were really just doing, like I said, they did what they knew with the tools that they had. And my parents and I are very close now. I can talk to my parents about mostly anything, and they've even called me to talk to people they know about their kids who are struggling, and wanting to talk to me about what my thoughts were as a clinician to help their kid. And they want my advice. They want to hear from me when it comes to my profession. They trust me in that area. I think our relationship is better than it's ever been, honestly.
And at that root, that's what you were saying that you always wanted and you were always looking for, is that they trust you and they listen to you and they value your opinion. It changes the dynamic entirely. And I also think something that you said, I just want to point out how long that period you were seeking to understand your parent and the choice that they made, and you were still so forgiving for a few years, right? Because and that's a long time for a child to, you didn't immediately resort to anger and shutting them out. You were trying to understand for a very long time before you couldn't anymore.
I also think that they took time too afterwards to listen to me and my experience and what I went through. And they also have learned through me telling them, like, this doesn't work for our relationship. Like, you can't, this is a boundary. And I've had to set boundaries and said, like, you cannot, lecture me and give me unsolicited advice when I don't ask you. Like, you can't show up whenever you feel like it. You can't, like, I am an adult, and I also, I want my parents to always know that I respect them and I appreciate their opinions, and I value them. But at the same time, I think something that my parents were really afraid of, and the root of all of it, is that they, my mom specifically, I think she was always so anxious that it was like, don't let her fail. And you have to let your child fail. And I think that's something parents don't get sometimes. Like, I want to shelter them from the world and I want to keep them safe. And I get that. Like, anxiety does that. The world is a scary place. And I think that my parents were so consumed by that fear that it didn't allow them to like actually be present and understand what it was that I was seeking. I don't know how else to explain that, but they had to learn after how to talk to me or to show me love or whatever in the ways that I was able to receive it. And I had to, that took a lot of trial and error. My both of my parents I've had ebbs and flows in my relationships with them. It hasn't always been hunky-dory, but I would say the last several years of my life have been great. And I think that we're all in a place of mutual understanding, and we respect each other, and they respect me, and they're very proud of me. And they, my dad is, both of my parents are like, you are inspiring, and you are, my dad always says, you're a success story. I think they really now can understand me so much more than they did then. And again, that goes back to, what I would tell parents. If you don't feel like you understand your child, listen. And if they can't express it to you, go to family therapy. Try to understand. If a therapist is telling you what they're seeing from your child, listen, and try to go home and slowly make changes so that your child can adapt and that you can adapt.
What advice would you give to teens and parents in that reunification process? Like after, they come out of the program, whether it's advice to the child, advice to the parent, like what to kind of get where you are today and where your parents are. And I know listen, but also like advice in repairing some of that once they realize that it wasn't what they thought.
Yeah. I think the most damaging thing you could say to your child is like, but it was helpful. Or like, but you liked it. Or something like that, like
invalidating.
It's very yes. I think, and that's why I said, listen, don't, I think the biggest thing, if you're the reunification process, just be there. If you're pulling your child from a program, or if they've just graduated and you're noticing that they're not themselves anymore, just be there. Ask them, like, are you okay? Like, how are you feeling? I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. I don't even know what to say, honestly, because I think everyone's experience is so different. I'm sure some parents aren't even open to the idea that this is not a helpful thing. But I would say that any parent who's, trying to reunify, just try to understand your child's experience, put yourself in their shoes and apologize. I think that's a big piece. Say you're sorry, because your intentions were probably really good. And I think it's okay to say that. I did my best with what I had, at the same time, I'm sorry. And I didn't know, or I would have never wanted to put you in harm's way. And I would have never put you there if I knew that was happening, because most parents feel that way. But it's a very, I know my parents have expressed feeling guilt and shame about it. And I'm sure a lot of parents do. And I think that's something to work through too. Work through your own guilt and shame, and apologize to your child, and apologize to yourself. Because you were manipulated too, and you deserve to give yourself a moment to understand that and unpack that as well.
I'm very impressed at the level of resilience that it takes to stand so firm in this isn't right and I'm not going to cave to it.
I did crumble so many times. I think your brain goes into survival mode, and some people fight, some people freeze, and some people run. And I've always been and will always be a fighter. I don't know where that comes from. I'm not sure if it comes from my parents or if their parents. But when there's a crisis, I am always a fighter, and I will always be on top of things, which is why I'm so good at my job. I honestly think it was just my brain's way of surviving, honestly. And I think as time went on, after every school, I just think something I think I would tell myself, and I don't really remember doing this, but I'm sure I have. I do remember doing it at some points in my life. It's just, if I could get through that, I can get through this. And I think that's been the thing. It's like, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. If I can do that, then what else can I do? So it was like, I always had like a guard for such a long time, where it was just like, this is just the way I am. I think I was very hardened because I was in survival mode for so long. And something that my best friends told me I think I was probably 25, 26. After college was, it had to actually be approached to me by two separate people, which was like, you're always defensive. You're always on the defense. And like, I feel like sometimes I can't speak to you. And I had to really like work on that and unlearn it. And I think what that came from is like constantly I was trying to protect myself for so long. And I think honestly, when you're asking me like where does the resilience comes from, it comes from self-protection. And that's inherent in everyone. Your brain does things because it is doing everything to keep you alive. And, for me, that was fighting. And I think it will always be that way. And I'm very proud to say that I'm very happy that I'm a fighter. But there was definitely times in my life where I wish I could just freeze, or run and I just couldn't. That's just never who I've been. And I think that's really what it comes down to is your brain is going to do it and your body's going to do what it needs to do to survive. And all you can do after, and what I've done after is be grateful. And I think something I've had to learn afterwards too is to give myself compassion, because there were so many maladaptive things that I learned that weren't helpful. And I had to unlearn that, at least the defensive piece, and learn how to be vulnerable again, and learn how to allow myself to cry in front of my friends and allow myself to be vulnerable so that people could really see me, authentically me, and not the way I wanted people to see me.
In those crucial adolescent years, your relationships with women were to sit in a room and attack each other.
Yes.
So of course, when a friend tells you something your immediate response is going to be, I want to defend myself, because it's always an attack. Like it always feels like an attack, even if it's not. And even that's just ingrained in you. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. Like I have friends that for 15 years I've been speaking to them.
Of course, you're bonded over
trauma.
So yeah. And so that's probably the confusing piece, I guess, is what I mean by that. With that, you are so close with these women,
but they can turn on you any instant.
But they can turn on you at any moment, and so you go defensive because you want to protect that. You're like, I want to protect my friendship. I don't want you to think that I was doing what you think I'm doing or trying to hurt you or like it comes from a place of fear.
Again, like self-protection. It was also a way to keep me safe and like show people. Like I just remember being in college and just being like, oh, I'm a badass. Like no one can touch me. Like I feel like that was like the attitude that I adopted for myself. Like I'm unbreakable. And the reality is I'm not. I'm vulnerable. I'm soft. I just have a very hard shell, and that was created. I think it's a lot of times how people perceive me. It's like it's a very demanding presence, very confident, but really inside I don't think I'm those things. I think I'm very gooey and very, I have a lot of my own struggles, and I'm just navigating life every day like everybody else.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Your experience in general has just been, I don't really think there's a word to describe it. And I'm just so sorry that you had to experience something that there's no word for it. Yeah. And I just appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. And I know that you don't know me, and with other people that are going to hear this that don't know you, and because there are going to be other people. And I think, Cecilia, you and I say this every time, is that we might not know it, but somebody else is going to hear this and identify with it. And it'll go so much farther than you think. So I wish I had more time with you, because I would love to hear more about it. I would love to know more about you, because seeing you now, I just hope you know that my first impression is, you would never expect that you had been through something so dark and hard and awful, because the first thing I thought was you were so confident when I got on the call with you. Like you look at you sit up straight right now. Like you just, I think that you have a very demanding presence that speaks to having a lot of confidence. And I just think it's very, very awesome that that's how you conduct yourself now. And I know that I don't know all about you, and there are still some things that you're dealing with, but I really hope that you're proud of yourself for where you're at now. And I just really appreciate your time today. Yeah. So I think I just was like, I admire you, instead of asking any follow-up questions.
Which is fine.
Cecilia goes, do you have any more questions? And I'm like, no, what if I just told you how much I like you?
You're like, no, I just love you.
actually am just so happy to meet you.
Well, I think that confidence piece is really awesome because it's so true.
Yeah.
And you've always had that presence about you. And that's incredible. A testament to who you are to your core, because you went through so many programs that their entire goal is to make sure you don't present yourself the way that you present yourself today. Like, it's to
exactly. Yes.
That's what. Yeah.
Oh, do you want me to do the ending blip?
Oh yeah. Okay.
I always volunteer and then I want to throw up. Okay. Okay.
People pleasing.
Yep, there you go. I didn't expect you to say yes. Okay.
I didn't expect you to say yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in to Her Best Interest. We release episodes bi-weekly on Wednesdays. You can find them on Spotify or our website, www.herbestinterest.com. And you can find more updates on our social media. We are on Facebook and on Instagram at @_herbestinterest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.